Hi, everyone. Evan Kirstel with another amazing discussion with industry thought leaders and experts. Today, we have quite a discussion ahead on CPaaS and CX and how they are interlinked, intertwined, interconnected. We have Adrian Swinscoe from the UK. Adrian, how are you?
I'm great, Evan. Great to be here. Thanks for very much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. And Patrick Sullivan, 2600 Hertz. Patrick, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for asking, Evan.
And congratulations on the jacket. It's really fantastic. Living the
Well, I have
dream.
to,
Living the
you know,
dream.
it's nice and early where I'm at, so I had to spice up the morning. So yeah, and also, Adrian, it looks like it's a little blurry in the UK right now. Is that the background or?
Yeah, that's just the kind of the fuzzy background. I'd bet the best of luck on this type of one rather than putting a false one, which then end up kind of looking like it's cutting out half my face. So
Oh, that's half the fun though.
I thought it was just fog. You know, there's always fog in the UK.
yeah,
But
I've got the
Adrian,
window
maybe
got
maybe
the window
introduce
open.
yourself. We were chatting earlier. You've been around the block a few times when it comes to CX, customer experience. You're an author, analyst, consultant. What else are you?
Oh, crumbs. Uh, Troublemaker, general agitator for kind of like better outcomes in kind of the service and experience sort of space. That's sort of the thing I'm really interested in is that how do we build, nurture, develop, start, establish, as it were, organizations that produce better outcomes for both their customers and their people. And I say people in the broadest sense. I mean, like people that work, people that supply services to organizations that deliver these services to clients, and their stakeholders as well, management, investors, community, the whole shooting match.
Indeed, and one thing I'm very curious about punk CX. First of all, what is it? And were you a punk rocker back in the day? Is that where that came from?
So let me kind of like say this for the record. So I'm not old enough to be an original punk. Um, I'm very much my first formative musical genre was new wave ska. And that was back in the early '80s, and then I came to sort of post punk kind of period. I must say, two of my favorite bands are American. One is Bad Religion, who's from California, where you're currently at right now, Evan, and also Fugazi, which is not that just down the road from you, that are based out of Washington D.C. And so they're very much in that sort of post-punk sort of period. So I do call myself a bit of a punk as a background, and Punk CX was, if you like, I guess a meditation on where kind of like where I thought the CX the customer experience space was right when I kind of currently wrote it. I was getting really back a few years ago. I was getting really frustrated with the lack of significant progress and improvement in these outcomes. And in a bit of a drunken drinking session with a friend of mine, Oshin, I blurted out, "I wish somebody would do something a bit more punk." And that sat with me for a little while, and I thought about it, and I thought about where punk music came from. And then punk explored out the back of progressive rock in the 1970s as this back to basics, all heart and emotion, anybody can have a go type of movement. And it made me think about where CX was, and it struck me that CX was exhibiting some of the same characteristics as progressive rock did in the 1970s, i.e., it's overly codified, benchmarked, metric, frameworked, blah 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 blah. And therefore, I thought to myself, if that's true, then what would a punk version look like? And so the
Well, I
book,
think a punk. I think a punk version would look like Patrick Sullivan
well,
because
it could do.
we've got the punk rocker in chief literally here on stage. And Patrick, I joke about that, but you were actually at an event I was at, the Cloud Communications Alliance in Fort Lauderdale, and you were a little controversial on stage there. But before we go into that, maybe just introduce yourself and who is 2600 Hertz? Maybe we should say, what is 2600 Hertz for the kids out there who are wondering why is a company named after a frequency?
Oh,
But
absolutely. Well, so first of all, Adrian, I also listened to Bad Religion. That was one of my favorite bands growing up, so that's pretty cool. And punk did kind of start out in the UK, so I think you definitely had the origins there. Um, For 2600 hertz, so we named our company for all the kids out there who don't know what freaking was. Back in the early 80s, people like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak realized that if you use the actual 2600 hertz tone, the carriers would actually thought you hung up the call, and so you can make international calls for free. And so they built these little blue boxes that would make the tone. And then that was the first thing they sold. So before they started Apple, they started to sell these little blue boxes that made the tone. And we named the 2600 hertz organization after that because that was really the first time you kind of opened up the telecom network. It was a very enclosed, kind of ecosystem. They didn't want you to know how anything worked. And that was really the first time, like, quote unquote hackers got into it and realized, hey, the telecom network actually really is very, very cool. We just never had access to it. And our company has always kind of believed in trying to give access to, the people. And, this is why we open source our core. We, try to make sure that, not just large organizations use our software, but, even anybody who's just getting started into telecom, if they want to use it, they can just download it for free and start kicking the tires and, playing around with it.
Yeah, what a fantastic approach, and congratulations on the award you won recently with TMC at IT Expo. That was really a great, exciting opportunity for you guys. Top UC Solution of the Year per TMC. But let's dive into the topic around CPaaS and CX. And, Adrian in particular, I'll get some thoughts on this. Here's some numbers that I pulled from Gartner and Metrigy before the call. Consumers want better CX. They would actually switch brands based on CX. And while many companies are leveraging CPaaS, they're really not delivering yet the experiences that CPaaS promises. So Adrian, where are we? What's the disconnect between what consumers, customers, enterprises want and what they're being delivered today?
I think it comes back to that music analogy. Sometimes people are trying to do this progressive rock type of solo on a 12-string guitar with a kind of like a 10-piece band behind them. And it's almost a bit like sometimes it becomes a bit complicated, too complicated. And in many ways, I think organizations often give themselves corporate indigestion in many ways. And I think actually what they need to do is need to kind of almost like get back to basics, like focus on really kind of what it is. And this is one of the clear kind of things. I think it's the real Achilles heel thing is that many organizations don't really have a really storied vision about the experience that they want to deliver to their customers. And therefore, because of that, they don't really have a clear idea of what they need to do in order to plot their path from where they currently are to where they need to be. And so they end up doing all this stuff. It's a bit like chucking spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. And I think actually, given all that, it gets kind of very complicated, and they sort of lose sight of this. What are the things they can do that's going to create kind of impact? And they kind of lose sight of they get stuck behind their data and there's kind of like their spreadsheets and their kind of like their scorecards and all these different things. And actually what they need to do is almost like smash the distance between them and their customers to really understand what's important to them. And then use all the data and technology to facilitate the delivery of what's important to them. And so I think it's trying to keep it simple is kind of there's the clear message, because everything's about momentum. It's all about momentum in relationship, because we're in a relationship game. Experience is only ever about relationships. You see, what you're going to do today to earn the right to have that relationship continue tomorrow. That's it. People lose sight of that.
Yeah, and relationships when it comes to communication services often mean personalization.
Yeah.
You actually wrote quite a lot about that recently in a Forbes piece. You want to give us a summary of some of your thoughts there?
Oh, yeah. Because crumbs. There was and I know we were talking before off air, Evan, and you were talking about going to an NTT event. And the NTT do this, it started with Dimension Data, and then now it's become an NTT Global Benchmarking Report. And NTT produced this one, I think it was back in 2021, and talked about personalization. And so they established that, yes, customers want it, and organizations, brands want to deliver it. But what they realize is they're just missing the target. And what was clear from that is that organizations are just not listening to their customers. They're not listening to what they want. It's like they don't want necessarily just more personalized ads. They want people to know them when they show up, or when they land on their website, or when they kind of call up, and they don't want to have to say repeat themselves. They want say agents or service reps, when they get in touch with them, whether it's by live chat or kind of phone or email or whatever, to have ready access to their data and their information, also their conversation kind of an interaction kind of history, all of those things that makes this, which allows and facilitates that more personalized kind of touch. I know me, understand me, respect me, hear me, all of these different sort of things. And so I think that's the thing that's the problem that's at the heart of personalization, is that customers are telling organizations what they want, but many organizations are not listening.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Patrick, I mean, a lot of what you focus on at 2600 Hertz is personalization. You don't just deliver a plain white vanilla kind of service, right? Maybe talk about how you see the world of personalization, customization, as far as your reseller carrier
Yep,
partners.
absolutely. I think you're seeing an evolution in telecom. Originally, when it first started out, people were really focused on like which features and functionality that each platforms have. And the people who are building the platforms, they didn't really think about the end users. They thought more of like, hey, the checkboxes. Like, how do we win these RFPs? How do we make sure that we have all these different checkboxes? And then something magical happened about 12 or 13 years ago. You know, the growth of CPaaS really took hold. And, we'll give a lot of credit. Twilio wasn't the original CPaaS provider, but they did a great job on really educating the market on what a developer API was, especially in telecom. And, but that was kind of like not the end of CPaaS. That was just the beginning. And, there's an old saying, which is someone's product eventually will be someone else's feature. And how we see this market is CPaaS is not necessarily its own product. It's just a feature that should be added on to like other features. And so our underlying core platform is really based on this idea that the core platform can massively scale. You can deploy it anywhere you want. But it gives you all the functionality of a true UCaaS solution, a true call center solution, and it has all open APIs. So you do have the CPaaS too. And the CPaaS is really an open API, gives you the ability to kind of customize your solution based on who your target audience is. And so if you are looking at a particular vertical, let's say, the pizza industry or lawyers, you can really customize your solution for that vertical. Where you're not just saying, hey, here's your desk phone, and here's your soft phone, and here's your mobile phone. You're saying, hey, we understand your workflow. We understand when a call comes in, exactly what's happening. We understand the point of sale system you're using. We understand the CRM. And because we understand this so well, we've created a solution that's actually very customized for your particular workflow. And that's actually, in that type of sales, you're solution selling. And when you're solution selling, it's no longer, hey, how do I beat my competitors by just lowering my price? You're coming in with a solution when everybody else is coming in with features. And that's where you can really take advantage of the market. And what we're seeing is, especially with like a lot of our partners and customers, where they really either focus on a vertical, or they focus on a particular industry, or they focus on an enterprise, they have the ability to come in there and deliver a customized solution based on what the end users like experience should be, not what they want it to be. And that gives them a huge competitive advantage, because at that point you can charge anything you want. Because if you're solving a real pain point for your customer, the customer doesn't care about what the cost is. They know that you made their employees way more efficient. You know that you made their customers way happier. And at that point, then you can charge anything you want. And that's really where we're seeing the evolution of telecom. It's no longer like a one size fits all. If you're competing against, companies like, no, I'm not saying Ring Central, I'm saying companies like Ring Central or companies like 8x8, it's you have the ability to beat them every time, because you can customize your solution based on who, like your target audience, and you're not just trying to sell a one size fits all for everybody.
Yeah, one size definitely doesn't fit all. And to that effect, it wouldn't be a tech conversation if we didn't talk about AI and chat, uh, in particular, the phenomenon that's OpenAI these days. Um, what is maybe you can talk about this, Adrian? What does that mean for the customer journey and CX? These amazing tools that have begun to come out of the woodwork, like ChatGPT. Do you have an opinion formed yet on these things?
Well, I'm sort of a little bit. I'm sort of a little bit waiting and seeing. I mean, I think there's no doubt that GPT-3 and ChatGPT that's come on top of that is important, and it's going to be hugely impactful. But I think but there's a lot of noise about it. It's going to change everything sort of right now, and I'm a bit like, is it though? I think generative AI, which is kind of the building off of the GPT-3 thing and that sort of modeling skill and how you can point it at a finite set of your own information and how you can give people quick access to it, whether it's customers and or employees, things. I think that's going to be transformative in the whole service and experience sort of space. I think there's such a lack of control for ChatGPT to get plugged directly into kind of a service and experience kind of right now, particularly when you consider, one, that it's only based on data up to the end of 2021, and two, it's only based on English language, the English language part of the internet, which then takes up about 50% of the whole internet, but doesn't cover other kind of languages.
And when will we have Scottish? That's the key.
Well, that's kind of like maybe a small kind of part, but I just think the thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we don't get carried away with the hype and understand kind of where the power kind of is. And it's almost like, here's a spanner. Okay, it's not a spanner that's going to fix everything, but it's almost like, where can we put the spanner? How we can use the power of the tool to kind of to drive those better outcomes. So without a doubt, I think some of that stuff is incredibly important. I think the generative AI type of stuff and that what GPT-3 has done to push that forward is going to be, well, over the next 2-3 years, I think it's going to be hugely impactful.
So Patrick, you must get asked all the time by customers about AI use cases and chat and messaging. I imagine you're a bit of a Switzerland. You'll work with any third party tools, APIs, but what are you seeing on the ground as far as some of the AI use cases for CX?
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting. So we have an AI division, and we've built some really cool internal tools for our use and consumption. And some of these tools go around for we code in this antiquated language called Erlang. And not a lot of people know about Erlang. It's a phenomenal language, but again, it's not really well known. And
you may not want to call it antiquated, though. That might
I
your
probably
marketing
would say
people.
Antiquated. All my Erlang engineers are about to murder me just by saying that. Let's say it's a lesser
old school. It's old, lesser, okay.
Extremely powerful, especially in a distributed manner. So the cool thing is, we're starting to use, AI to, help generate code, and actually help, like when our engineers are doing it, it can give them code samples and, figure out hey, if we're trying to build a certain module or something like that, it can help speed up the coding process. So that's really cool. And it also, it's allowed us to, over a 13-year period, we had a lot of different repositories of information, and it's been able to kind of generate and gather all those information, brings it together so that if people are asking questions, it can deliver those questions. And again, it really helps our internal process. And eventually we're going to open that up to the public. The second part is, as far as a customer experience, we've been playing around with this idea that, call centers are kind of ripe for opportunity. And so when a call comes in, a lot of times if you have a new agent, using technologies like ChatGPT or just, a myriad of them, you can help train your agent by giving you samples of hey, on the fly, this is what, the caller said, here's a good response. And so you're help training your agents so that they get, more, quicker understanding, and they don't have to sit through a 3-week training course before they can start taking calls, and then the second part of that too is, especially the low level kind of conversations, the reality is a lot of that should be automated. and you should have your agents there to kind of back up the automation. And so that if a customer is angry, it can actually detect when the customer is angry, and then it automatically, puts a live person on the phone. And there's going to be a transition period. It's not going to be perfect. I think, anybody who's not kind of embracing, AI for the long run is kind of being, I don't want to say a world of hurt, but they're going to be left behind. Like, to me, I was never that excited about, quote unquote web 3.0. I was never excited about like, okay, great. I understand crypto. I get ledgers. I understand like, oh, that's really powerful for certain industries. I think AI is actually transformative. And I actually think since the internet, this is the next big transformative situation. And I still think we're still early on. We're in the pets.com days where it's like, who knows what's going to work out, who knows what's not going to work out. But I think anybody who's not thinking about it, at least, is in bad shape. And, if there's a lot of cool technologies out there now, but I think in the next year or two, it's going to be even exponentially growing faster and faster. And even you hear things like Google, like, they're angry right now because, when ChatGPT came out, they're like, we had this technology already. We're just trying to be, this is what they're saying. They're saying, hey, we're just trying to be responsible and not release this to the public. Or OpenAI just kind of released this, and now everybody's like all giddy about them. But like, we have this technology already. So I think you're going to start seeing some of the big players starting releasing their stuff really quickly just because ChatGPT is taking off. And, like even my mom asked me about it the other day, and she doesn't even understand like, how her computer turns on and off and stuff. So it's really kind of an interesting world we're living in right now.
Yeah, I may or may not have written a Mother's Day card with ChatGPT to my mom. I hope you're not listening, Mom. But switching back to the CPaaS, I mean, this is an exciting space. It's been a long time coming, kind of like AI. It's been a little bit under the hood for over a decade. And that's why we're excited at the CPaaS Acceleration Alliance on really getting the word out and focusing on this space specifically. But Adrian, are you optimistic, in adoption and use cases and acceleration of CPaaS into the CX world, or are you sort of more in British, reserved opinions on how quickly CPaaS is really going to generate revenue? I mean, this is a Gartner number of billions and billions in sales by 2026.
I think that I would, let's say I'm excited by the possibility and know that all the building blocks are all there. I am probably a little bit more cautious about the general mood for how kind of fast people are going to move with it. I think that, so I wrote a piece recently that was about Dialpad that's just come out with this unified kind of like platform. They basically create this thing called TrueCast, and it's all trying to solve these two problems. One is that most customer contact is handled through CCaaS systems, and most internal comms is handled through UCaaS, and they tend to like try and sit and integrate and all these different things. But what they do is and the modern CCaaS kind of platforms are there trying to help and enable the kind of agents. But when you've got kind of increasingly digital tools and automated tools that are helping customers self-serve, then some of the stuff that comes in to agents real time tend to be more complex and more nuanced and tend to rely on more input from the back office or the middle office or whatever. And then you get into this messy middle of customer experience where you're relying on other people's inputs into kind of like to solve that kind of problem kind of fast and efficiently. And so that doesn't happen very well when you sit in sometimes CCaaS and UCaaS on top of each other. And so the building and the producing of this TrueCast platform where you're putting when you're putting it all together, and you're putting all the data in one point together, where you can then start to really kind of analyze it and create automated workflows and produce insights in real time, as we were talking about. But I think is the way kind of forward. How fast people will move on that, I think, is interesting. I think they'll face some headwinds around who buys what in larger organizations, because a CCaaS buyer and a UCaaS buyer are sort of generally different. ultimately it might come out of the one kind of budget, but the buyers in the process can be different. But I think there's some exciting developments, and the whole idea about using the CPaaS possibly on the side to understand and add in sort of some composability around that, I think is really interesting. So as I say, I'm really excited about some of this sort of like stuff. And as Patrick was saying, that the contact center is an absolute gold mine for data. I mean, this is the way I think about it. It's like it's a gold mine for data, not for kind of quality assurance, but also kind of for real time guidance and analysis around sentiment and everything else. But I think further on from that, I think it's also an opportunity to increase engagement and to build on, to go back to what we were talking about before, build on that personalization kind of layer, because I'm pretty sure we'll be able to get to a point where we can automatically detect whether we've had a positive resolution on a interaction or a call, and then have a system automatically prompt an agent to say, ask the customer if they've got 10 seconds to ask a couple of other additional questions that will help us more personalize our service to them. And you ask those kind of questions, and they're all done by, and then the technology parses out the voice data, but the important parts of the data, and then feeds it back into your CRM or your decisioning kind of hub that updates kind of on the fly. So you end up kind of inching towards that ultimate one-to-one engagement kind of model. I think it's all there. All the building blocks are there. How quickly people will get to that? Patrick, you probably have a better view on that than I will.
Yeah, and Patrick, I mean, you recently joined the CPaaS Acceleration Alliance as one of the founding members, so thank you for that. And yeah, 34 billion in sales by 2026. You just need like 10% of that, right? And you'll be very happy.
I was thinking for 20%, but yeah, I guess that's fine. First of all, I love that. I love the dial pads trying to create their own industry by saying now there's a thing called TrueCast. For me, I'm like, I'm going to start FunPass, and, like FunPass is going to be even better than TrueCast, So, no, it's interesting. And Dialpad's right in the sense that, like, I think the days of companies that are solely being a CPaaS company, their days are limited. I mean, you can even see, like, and not to get controversial, but, a lot of the robocalls have been now pointed their finger at, like, Twilio's top 5% of the robocalls, because they made it easy for you to send text messages. And so these, bad actors started sending text messages through Twilio. And now, Twilio's getting, kind of the old fingers shucking at them and stuff. So I think if you're only a CPaaS player, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And if you're only a UCaaS player or a CCaaS player, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. I think the only people who are going to survive and actually thrive in this, next generation of communications are really the ones that, combine everything. And they're the ones that can say, hey, look, here's your UCaaS for SMB. Like, when a call comes in, it connects to your point of sale system. It does everything. Now, the next trick is they do have the building blocks. How do they build it? And, it's not like, hey, here's these super simple Legos. Sometimes people don't understand any aspects of the communication, like network and stuff. So, our viewpoint is there's two things you need to do. One is you have to train and educate, and that's through documentation. That's actually through, and this is part of the reason we're actually using AI to, kind of bring all the documentation together, and not just our documentation, but just a general understanding of how everything works. And then the other thing is, the old hello world. Like, how do you get developers to, kind of really embrace that kind of ecosystem? And our viewpoint is, we have a full professional services team that have been helping customers, like, get their, CPaaS, or getting our CPaaS integrated into their systems. But we've also noticed that, a lot of service providers that we work with, a lot of resellers, they're starting to try to figure out how to bring in either their own developer community, or kind of build out like an ecosystem of developers using their platforms and stuff. So, I think the next wave, you're going to have two things. One is really trying to understand what your customer journey is. And then two is figuring out how you're going to solve for your customer journey. And that's not just with the building blocks, but that's with the people who can actually put together a fun, exciting customer experience and then connect the blocks together and stuff. And this is where, you know, our company really is focused on, which is, hey, here's the building blocks, and here's the ecosystem of developers that will work with you to kind of build it based on what your end customer is going to look like, if that makes sense.
Love it. Totally makes sense. And as a follow-up question, Patrick, we got years off to a roaring start. What are you most excited about this year, the next few weeks, next few quarters? And do you have any predictions you want to make, or any events you want to plug?
Yeah, absolutely. There's the Cavell Group is going on in Europe. I think in March 7th, if I believe. So we'll be there speaking
Great.
at that event, and you know that's fantastic. The CCA was just happening in Florida, and that is a fantastic event. I will say, you know, some of the excitement for us, it's really, you know, and this is purely evil, but we have a bunch of. So long story short, Cisco bought Broadsoft, who is probably, you know, in my industry was the biggest kind of like behemoth. They owned about 80% of the market share. And then Microsoft bought Metaswitch, which owned about 15% of the market share. And this both happened a couple years ago. We're now at this point where a lot of these service providers and resellers are looking for kind of like their next generation platform. And when they're looking at these next generation platforms, they're really kind of focusing on, you know, what can deliver a UCaaS solution, what can deliver a CCaaS solution, what can deliver a CPaaS solution, all under the same code base. Because what they don't want is having, you know, 3 different code bases where nothing interacts with each other. And then if you set up an account for, you know, on your call center, then you have to set up a different account on your UCaaS. And then if you're trying to integrate, you know, even simple things like text messaging, it's almost impossible because they're all different systems. And I think this is why, you know, we're super excited where the future is going, is that because, you know, we're delivering a platform that's under the same code base that can do all of this. It's kind of like a one-stop shop for our resellers and our service providers. And we have a ton of different integrations through Microsoft Teams, through Slack, through all these fun things, because, you know, our viewpoint is we don't need to reinvent the wheel on all aspects of communications. We should either integrate with everything out there, and just be almost kind of like the orchestration layer that kind of connects everything together. So I'm super excited. You know, I think you're going to hear some big announcements of some of these very large service providers that, you know, have finally said that they will talk about us, because a lot of times people say we're the best hidden kept secret in telecom, which I hate hearing that. And, you know, part of the reason we're on this call right now is, Evan, you know, you are one of the best known resources in telecom. So, you know, if people know you, we want to be, you know, riding your coattails and stuff.
Well, I'm happy to have my coattails ridden, and it's great to collaborate as part of the CPaaS Acceleration Alliance, you know, nonprofit, industry-based education, outreach, and even some entertainment, right, Adrian? So what about you? What are you looking forward to over the next weeks and months?
Oh, crumbs. Well, I'm always kind of excited by, I mean, I just love the work that I do. And so I will say something which is slightly kind of like off kind of topic. I'm excited about the prospect of Brighton and Hove Albion achieving European football in the English Premier League this year. So because we are pretty close and going strong.
No one watching here in the US knows what you're talking about. But yes, good luck to them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have no idea what you just said.
So if anybody who watches the EPL, the English Premier League, well, Brighton, which is a place where we used to live up until middle of last year, have this scrappy, well-run football team who are sitting currently 6th in the league, which might mean they'll qualify for Europe kind of like next year, which they're probably not ready for, but it's still exciting anyway, because we can end up planning kind of like jaunts to lots of different parts of Europe to go and see them play.
All right. As long as you just watch, no rioting, please. No throwing beer cans.
No, none of that.
But yes, none of that nonsense. Well, in any case, really great chatting with you guys. I'm trying to find some punk rock music to play us out on, but so maybe this will work. Okay. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks
so much.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.